As she sat, the desert stretched endlessly, a sea of golden dunes under the relentless gaze of the sun. The Sahara was a place of extremes, of scorching days and frigid nights, of silence so profound it felt like a living thing. But today the silence was broken by the hum of machinery and the murmur of voices. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood at the edge of the excavation site, her boots sinking into the fine sand, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She had spent years chasing shadows, following fragments of myths and legends whispered by nomadic tribes. Stories of a black pyramid, older than time itself, hidden beneath the shifting sands. A structure said to hold secrets that could rewrite history, or end it. Evelyn was not a woman easily given to fantastical thinking. She was a scientist, a pragmatist, a scholar, who had built her career on facts and evidence. But the legends of the Black Pyramid had always felt different. They were too consistent, too detailed, too persistent to be mere folklore. And now, standing here, she felt the weight of those stories pressing down on her, as tangible as the heat of the sun. The team had been working for weeks, painstakingly mapping the area with ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery. The data had been inconclusive at first, hinting at something buried deep beneath the sand, but offering no clear answers. Then, just days ago, a sandstorm had swept through the region, its fierce winds scouring the surface and revealing what lay beneath. The outline of a massive structure, geometric and precise, had emerged from the dunes. A pyramid. But not like any pyramid Evelyn had ever seen. The stone was black. Not the weathered gray of ancient limestone, but a deep obsidian black that seemed to absorb the light. It was smooth, almost glassy, with no visible seams or joints. The surface was covered in intricate carvings, symbols that looked like hieroglyphs but were unlike any language Evelyn had encountered. They seemed to shift and writhe when viewed from the corner of the eye, as though alive. Evelyn approached the exposed section of the pyramid, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the stone. It was cold, unnaturally so, as though it had been carved from ice rather than rock. The sensation sent a shiver down her spine, but she forced herself to focus. This was it, the discovery of a lifetime, the thing she had been searching for. "Dr. Carter!" The voice broke her reverie and she turned to see Samir, her assistant, hurrying toward her. He was a young man, brilliant and eager, with a passion for archaeology that matched her own. In his hands he held a tablet, its screen glowing with the latest data from the ground-penetrating radar. "You need to see this," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "The scans, they're incredible. The pyramid is massive, bigger than anything we've ever seen. And there's something inside. Chambers, passages. It's like a labyrinth." Evelyn took the tablet, her eyes scanning the images. The structure was indeed enormous, dwarfing even the Great Pyramid of Giza. But it was the interior that caught her attention. The scans revealed a complex network of rooms and corridors arranged in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, as though designed to confuse or deter intruders. At the center of the pyramid was a large circular chamber, its purpose unclear. "We need to get inside," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to see what's in there." Samir nodded, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "The locals, they've been talking. They say the pyramid is cursed, that it's not meant to be disturbed." Evelyn frowned. She had heard the stories, of course. The nomadic tribes that roamed the desert spoke of the pyramid in hushed tones, calling it the tomb of the forgotten god. They claimed it was a place of death, a prison for something ancient and malevolent. But Evelyn had always dismissed such tales as superstition. She was a scientist, not a believer in curses. "We're not here to listen to ghost stories," she said firmly. "We're here to uncover the truth, and the truth is in there." She gestured toward the pyramid, her resolve hardening. The team worked tirelessly, clearing away the sand and debris to expose more of the structure. As the hours turned into days, the scale of the pyramid became increasingly apparent. It was a marvel of engineering, its precision and craftsmanship unlike anything Evelyn had ever encountered. The black stone seemed to defy the passage of time, untouched by erosion or decay. The carvings on its surface grew more intricate the deeper they dug, their meaning tantalizingly out of reach. But as the excavation progressed, strange things began to happen. Tools would go missing only to reappear in odd places. The air grew colder at night even as the days remained blisteringly hot. And then there were the whispers, faint, almost imperceptible but undeniably there. They seemed to come from the pyramid itself, carried on the wind like a distant chant. Evelyn tried to ignore it to focus on the work, but the unease was growing, spreading through the team like a virus. Even Samir, usually so level-headed, seemed on edge. "Do you feel it?" he asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "It's like we're being watched." Evelyn didn't answer. She had felt it too, a presence that seemed to hover just beyond the edge of perception. But she refused to give voice to her fears. To do so would be to admit that the legends might have some basis in reality, and that was a line she wasn't ready to cross. Then, one night, everything changed. Evelyn was in her tent reviewing the latest scans when she heard it. A low, resonant hum, like the sound of a distant engine. It was coming from the pyramid. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped outside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and she felt it in her bones, a vibration that seemed to resonate with something deep inside her. She approached the pyramid, her footsteps crunching in the sand. The black stone seemed to glow faintly, the carvings on its surface pulsing with an otherworldly light. The whispers were louder now, almost like a chant, and Evelyn felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to go inside. She hesitated, her rational mind screaming at her to stop, but the pull was too strong. She stepped through the narrow entrance, the beam of her flashlight illuminating the walls. The interior was a maze of narrow passages and towering chambers, the air thick with the scent of ancient dust. The carvings on the walls seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering light, their meaning just out of reach. Evelyn moved deeper into the pyramid, her heart pounding in her chest. The hum grew louder, more intense, and she felt a presence, ancient, malevolent, and impossibly vast. It was as though the pyramid itself was alive, watching her, waiting for her. At the heart of the structure she found it, a massive stone door sealed with a mechanism she couldn't comprehend. The carvings around it were more intricate than any she had seen, their patterns almost hypnotic. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold stone, and the whispers became a roar. Her flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. And then, she felt it. A presence, pressing in on her from all sides, ancient and hungry. It was in her mind, her soul, filling her with a terror so profound it threatened to consume her. She stumbled back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The hume faded, the whispers receded, and the darkness lifted. But the presence remained, a shadow at the edge of her consciousness. Evelyn fled the pyramid, her mind racing. She had found what she was looking for, but now, she wasn't sure she wanted it. The Black Pyramid was no mere tomb, it was a prison, and she had just awakened its captive. The discovery of a lifetime had become a nightmare, and the nightmare was only beginning. The desert night was a vast, unbroken expanse of darkness, the stars above cold and distant, their light offering no comfort. The camp, once a bustling hub of activity, was now eerily silent, the usual hum of generators and chatter of the team replaced by an oppressive stillness. The pyramid loomed in the near distance, its black silhouette cutting into the sky like a jagged wound. It seemed larger now, more imposing, as though it had grown in the hours since Evelyn's ill-fated exploration. Or perhaps it was just her imagination, frayed by exhaustion and the lingering terror of what she had encountered inside. Evelyn sat in her tent, her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The events of the night replayed in her mind like a broken record, the hum, the whispers, the presence. She had tried to rationalize it, to convince herself that it was nothing more than a trick of the mind, a product of stress and fatigue, but deep down she knew better. The pyramid was alive in a way she couldn't explain, and whatever lay within it was no longer content to remain hidden. The rest of the team had noticed the change in her. She had returned to camp pale and shaken, her usual composure shattered. Samir had been the first to approach her, his concern evident in his eyes. "What happened in there?" he had asked, his voice low and urgent. Evelyn had shaken her head, unable or unwilling to put the experience into words. "I don't know," she had said finally, "but we need to be careful. This place, it's not what we thought." Her words had done little to reassure him, and the unease had spread through the camp like a contagion. The team had always been a tight-knit group, bound by their shared passion for discovery, but now there was a tension in the air, a sense of foreboding that no amount of camaraderie could dispel. The next morning, the first signs of the curse began to manifest. It started with small things, tools going missing, equipment malfunctioning, strange noises in the night. The team chalked it up to the harsh conditions of the desert, to the stress of the excavation, but then Hassan disappeared. Hassan had been one of the local workers, a quiet man with a gentle demeanor and a knack for finding water in the most unlikely places. He had been with the team since the beginning, his knowledge of the desert invaluable. But when the sun rose that morning, his tent was empty, his belongings untouched. A search party was organized, but there was no trace of him. No footprints in the sand, no sign of struggle. It was as though he had simply vanished. The team was shaken, their earlier unease giving way to outright fear. "This place is cursed," one of the workers muttered, his voice trembling. "We should leave before it takes us too." Evelyn wanted to dismiss his words as superstition, but she couldn't. The memory of the pyramid's interior was too fresh. The presence she had felt too real. She called a meeting, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We're not leaving," she said firmly. "Not yet. We've come too far to turn back now, but we need to be cautious. No one goes near the pyramid alone, and if anyone sees or hears anything unusual, report it immediately." The team nodded, but their faces were pale, their eyes haunted. They were scientists, rational thinkers, but the desert had a way of stripping away the veneer of logic, leaving only raw instinct, and instinct was screaming at them to run. As the days passed, the strange occurrences grew more frequent, more sinister. The whispers returned, louder now, almost like a chant. The air grew colder, even in the heat of the day, and the shadows seemed to lengthen, stretching toward the camp like grasping fingers. The team began to avoid the pyramid, their fear outweighing their curiosity. But Evelyn couldn't stay away. She found herself drawn to the structure, her scientific curiosity warring with her growing dread. She spent hours studying the carvings on its surface, trying to decipher their meaning. They were unlike anything she had ever seen, their patterns intricate and hypnotic. They seemed to tell a story of creation and destruction, of gods and monsters, of a power so vast it could reshape the world. But there was something else, something darker. The carvings spoke of a prison, of a being so ancient and malevolent that it had been sealed away, hidden from the world. And they spoke of a warning to those who would dare to disturb its slumber. Evelyn's hands trembled as she traced the symbols, her mind racing. The pyramid wasn't a tomb, it was a prison, and they had awakened its captive. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she stumbled back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had to tell the team, had to warn them, but as she turned to leave, she felt it, the presence, pressing in on her from all sides, ancient and hungry. It was in her mind, her soul, filling her with a terror so profound it threatened to consume her. She fled the pyramid, her heart pounding in her chest. The camp was in chaos when she returned. The team gathered around Samir, his face pale and drawn. "What's going on?" Evelyn demanded, her voice sharp with fear. "It's Hassan," Samir said, his voice trembling. "He's back." Evelyn's blood ran cold. She pushed through the crowd, her eyes widening as she saw Hassan sitting on the ground, his eyes vacant, his skin pale and waxy. He was alive, but barely, his breath shallow and labored, and his hands were covered in blood. "What happened?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hassan looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and in that moment, Evelyn saw something ancient and malevolent, something that didn't belong in this world. "It's awake," he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken, "and it's hungry." The words sent a chill through the camp, the air growing colder still. The team stared at Hassan, their faces pale with fear, and then, without warning, he lunged. It happened so fast that no one had time to react. Hassan's hands, slick with blood, closed around the throat of the nearest worker, his strength inhuman. The man struggled, his eyes wide with terror, but it was no use. Hassan's grip was like iron, his face twisted into a mass of rage and Evelyn acted on instinct, grabbing a shovel and swinging it with all her strength. The blow connected with Hassan's head and he crumpled to the ground, his body twitching. The worker gasped for air, his hands clutching his throat, but he was alive. The team stared at Hassan's lifeless body, their fear giving way to horror. "What the hell is going on?" Samir demanded, his voice shaking. Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Hassan had been gone for days, and now he was back, possessed by something that had come from the pyramid. The curse was real, and it was only beginning. The team worked quickly, burying Hassan's body deep in the sand, far from the camp. But the damage had been done. The fear was palpable now, a living thing that hung over the camp like a shroud. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the air grew colder still. The team began to pack up, their resolve crumbling under the weight of their terror. But Evelyn knew it was too late. The pyramid had awakened, and its captive was free. They had unleashed something ancient and malevolent, something that would not be satisfied until it had consumed them all. As the sun set over the desert, casting long shadows across the dunes, Evelyn stood at the edge of the camp, her eyes fixed on the pyramid. The black stone seemed to glow faintly, the carvings on its surface pulsing with an otherworldly light. The whispers were louder now, almost like a chant, and Evelyn felt the presence, ancient, hungry, and impossibly vast. She knew what she had to do. The pyramid had to be sealed, the captive returned to its prison, but she also knew the cost. The curse would not be satisfied until it had claimed its due. The desert night was silent, the stars above cold and distant. And as Evelyn took her first step toward the pyramid, she knew there would be no turning back. The curse had been awakened, and it would not rest until it had consumed them all.
The desert was no longer silent. The wind, once a gentle whisper, now howled like a wounded beast, carrying with it the scent of decay and something far older. The sand shifted and swirled, as though the very earth were alive, restless and agitated. The black pyramid stood at the center of the maelstrom, its obsidian surface gleaming faintly under the pale light of the moon. It was no longer just a structure. It was a beacon, a pulsating heart of darkness that seemed to draw the very shadows toward it. Evelyn stood at the edge of the camp, her eyes fixed on the pyramid. The team was in disarray, their fear palpable, their voices a cacophony of panic and desperation. Some were packing, others arguing, a few simply staring into the distance, their minds broken by the horrors they had witnessed. Hassan's attack had been the final straw, the moment when the thin veneer of rationality had shattered, leaving only raw, primal fear. But Evelyn couldn't afford to succumb to fear, not now. The pyramid had awakened, and its captive, its prisoner, was free. She could feel it, a presence that pressed against her mind, ancient and malevolent, its hunger insatiable. It was in the air, in the sand, in the very fabric of reality, and it was growing stronger. She turned to Samir, who stood beside her, his face pale and drawn. "We have to go back inside," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We have to seal it. Whatever's in there, we have to put it back." Samir stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you insane? After what happened to Hassan? After what you saw in there? We need to get out of here while we still can." Evelyn shook her head. "It's too late for that. This thing? It's not just in the pyramid, it's everywhere. If we don't stop it, it will follow us. It will keep spreading, keep consuming, until there's nothing left." Samir opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his lips. He knew she was right. They had awakened something that should have remained buried, and now they had to face the consequences. The two of them moved quickly, gathering what little equipment they could, flashlights, ropes, tools, anything that might help them navigate the pyramid's labyrinthine interior. The rest of the team watched in silence, their faces a mixture of fear and resignation. No one offered to help. No one dared. As they approached the pyramid, the air grew colder, the whispers louder. The carvings on the surface seemed to writhe and shift, their patterns twisting into shapes that hurt the eyes. Evelyn forced herself to focus, to push aside the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She had to be strong. For the team, for the world. The entrance loomed before them, a dark maw that seemed to swallow the light. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped inside, Samir close behind. The interior was as she remembered it. Narrow passages, towering chambers, the walls covered in those same shifting carvings, but there was something different now. Something alive. The air was thick with a palpable energy, a sense of anticipation, as though the pyramid itself was waiting for them. They moved deeper into the structure, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, almost like a chant. Evelyn could feel the presence now, a weight pressing against her mind, ancient and hungry. It was in the walls, in the air, in the very stone beneath their feet. At the heart of the pyramid they found it, the massive stone door, sealed with a mechanism that defied comprehension. The carvings around it were more intricate than any they had seen, their patterns almost hypnotic. Evelyn approached the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the presence on the other side, a vast, malevolent force that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "We have to seal it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know how." Samir stared at the door, his face pale. "The carvings, they're not just decorations. They're instructions, a ritual maybe, something to seal the door." Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. She had studied the carvings for hours, trying to decipher their meaning. They spoke of a ritual, of sacrifices and offerings, of a power that could bind even the gods. But there was something else, something darker. The ritual required a price, a life. She turned to Samir, her eyes filled with dread. "The ritual, it needs a sacrifice, a life, to seal the door." Samir's face went pale, but he didn't hesitate. "Then we'll do it. We'll draw straws or—" "No," Evelyn interrupted, her voice firm. "It has to be me. I'm the one who woke it. I'm the one who has to fix this." Samir stared at her, his eyes filled with horror. "Evelyn, no! There has to be another way!" But Evelyn knew there wasn't. The presence was growing stronger, its hunger more insatiable. They were running out of time. She turned to the door, her hands trembling as she traced the carvings. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, and she felt the presence pressing against her mind, ancient and malevolent. She closed her eyes, focusing on the ritual, on the words and symbols that would seal the door. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. The pyramid seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its walls shifting and twisting. Evelyn could feel the presence on the other side of the door, vast and hungry, its rage palpable. She took a deep breath and began the ritual, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to consume her. The carvings glowed faintly, their patterns shifting and writhing. The air grew thicker, the whispers louder, almost like a chant. And then it happened. The door began to seal, the stone shifting and grinding as the mechanism activated. The presence roared in fury, its rage shaking the very foundations of the pyramid. Evelyn felt it pressing against her mind, ancient and malevolent, its hunger insatiable. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The ritual was almost complete, the door almost sealed. She could feel the life draining from her, the price of the ritual being paid. The last thing she saw was Samir's face, filled with horror and grief. And then, there was only darkness. The pyramid was silent once more, its black surface gleaming faintly under the pale light of the moon. The wind had died down, the sand settling once more. The camp was empty, the team gone, their fear driving them far from the cursed structure. But deep within the pyramid, in the heart of the labyrinth, the door was sealed. The presence was contained, its rage silenced, for now. But the desert is patient, and the sands shift with time, and the pyramid waits, its secrets buried, its captives slumbering. But not forever. For the curse is real, and it is only a matter of time before it awakens once more.